They say the true power of the crown resides not in its jewels, but in the silence it commands. For 1,000 years, the stone and marble of Buckingham and Windsor have guarded the ultimate secret, that the royal bloodline is a perfect machine, never to be disturbed, never to be seen cracking. We have been taught to believe in the myth of the monarchy, but the greatest drama of power is always played out in the dark, behind doors that were never meant to open. And on one recent, devastating evening, the silence was ripped apart by a command so final, so ruthless, it echoed across the entire Commonwealth. This story does not begin at midnight. It begins months earlier, in a series of whispers and calculated maneuvers. Queen Camilla, comfortable in the power she had spent decades acquiring, had begun to overreach. Her ambition, once a quiet shadow, became a visible, aggressive campaign. For Prince William, the pattern was clear, insidious, and aimed at the most protected entity in his world, his wife Catherine, and the innocence of his children. He began compiling the evidence in secret, not through official channels, which were already compromised, but through an inner circle of loyalists, old friends, former military contacts, people who dealt not in titles, but in unflinching truth. Every email, every forged signature, every planted headline was filed away. William was not gathering intelligence for a debate. He was building a legal weapon of mass destruction. The tension in the palaces became unbearable. Every dinner was a silent standoff. Every public engagement, a meticulously choreographed piece of theater where the two principal players knew they were on the verge of war. Camilla, fueled by the king's mounting weakness, grew bolder, issuing mandates that undermined William's authority. She misjudged him entirely, seeing the dutiful son, not the relentless commander. She mistook his silence for acceptance. The king had been scheduled for an extended stay away from London. William ensured the scheduling held firm. The timing was critical. The heir required no living monarch to execute a military order on palace grounds. At 10 p.m., William summoned the Lord Chancellor, not for counsel, but for confirmation. The power of the heir apparent was absolute in the physical absence of the sovereign. No gray areas, only cold constitutional certainty. Then came the true confrontation. At 11 p.m., William entered Camilla's private apartments. He did not knock. He did not announce himself. The meeting was brief, brutal, and devoid of emotion. He laid out the documented betrayal. The prince, who had inherited his grandmother's profound sense of duty, delivered his verdict without raising his voice. There was no rage, only an icy, terrifying finality. When Camilla began her defiant denial, her appeal to the king, William cut her off with 3 words that sealed her fate. 3 words that stripped her of every earned honor. You are dismissed. The transition from royal authority to military execution was immediate. The air pressure dropped. 2 men, faceless, colossal figures from the highest tier of protection, stepped from the shadows. These were not valets. They were guards who dealt in high-threat containment, bound by an oath to the highest security interests of the next sovereign. Camilla's shock was a physical tremor. She screamed treachery. She screamed betrayal. She clung to a priceless antique writing desk, her fingers scrabbling for purchase on a surface meant for signatures, not desperation. This was the moment the myth was ripped away. The former Queen Consort, reduced to a common captive, fought with a frantic, animalistic fear. The guards were relentless. They moved with silent, practiced force. They subdued her resistance without violence, but with a cold, professional grip that was far more humiliating. She was dragged, not walking, across the ancient Persian carpet, through a maze of back corridors and service tunnels that she, as queen, likely never knew existed. The sound of her velvet robes scraping across the stone floor was the only witness to the fall of a reign. They delivered her to a secondary gate, the vehicle waiting, dark, unmarked, and anonymous. It was a calculated message to the few witnesses. This event was to be scrubbed from the record, an anomaly that never happened. She was loaded in, along with a single small overnight bag, a fraction of the life she thought she had secured forever. As the car pulled away, disappearing into the dark, silent streets of the royal estate, the palace staff were already executing William's second decree. Every item of Camilla's personal property, every photograph, every official paper, not destroyed but archived, sealed away. The very presence of her memory was expunged from the royal residences, leaving behind only the air she once breathed. The morning papers would carry no hint of the event. But the whispers would begin, filtering through the ranks of the protection officers and the senior courtiers. The palace would appear calm, serene, flawless, but beneath the perfect facade, everyone who mattered knew. A line had been drawn. The future king had delivered the ultimate ruling: protect the bloodline at any cost. William stood at his window, looking out at the cold dawn breaking over the empty courtyard. He had just committed an act of unprecedented political brutality. But in the mirror he saw not a villain, but a man who had done what was necessary. He had purged the sickness. He had protected his wife and his children. And in doing so, the quiet prince had finally transformed into a terrifying, unassailable king. The machine was fixed, and the silence once again was absolute.